This is GEOTalks, a podcast by Blue Marble Geographics. This episode of GEOTalks highlights the power of mapping, collaboration, and accessible geospatial data. Bathymetric data provides vital information that informs decisions about marine environments. This month, Tomer Ketter of Map the Gaps and SubMerge and Sefano M Katz of the Pacific Blue Foundation join us on the show. They share their experience collecting data in the largely unmapped Beqa Lagoon, as well as the impact of accessible bathymetric data on marine conservation and social equity in Fiji.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to GeoTalks. I'm Mackenzie Mills.
And I'm Meg Scribner.
It is my pleasure to introduce our guests for this episode, Tomer Ketter and Sefano M Katz. Tomer is the director and co-founder of Map the Gaps and the ocean mapping lead for SubMerge. Welcome, Tomer. How are you today?
Hi, Mackenzie. Great to meet you again. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Hi, Tomer. It's great to have you on the show. As Mackenzie mentioned, this is a bit of an unconventional episode for us because we are joined by two guests. It's my pleasure to welcome Sefano M Katz to the show. Welcome to GeoTalks, Sefano. How are you?
Well, Vinaka, Meg. It's great to be here.
So Tomer and Sefano are here to share the important work they have accomplished together for the Beqa Lagoon in Fiji. We should start this episode by giving our listeners some context about the individual work that both of you do. So Tomer, can you start by telling us a little bit about your experience working with GIS data and how you may have used Global Mapper in the past?
Yes, I have used Global Mapper for many years, definitely over a decade now. I'm not sure which was the first version I've ever used, but it's always been a very useful tool in all of my different spatial applications.
That sounds great. Would you tell us a little bit about your role as co-founder of Map the Gaps?
All right, yeah, so Map the Gaps was founded after the Ocean Discovery X Prize challenge by a handful of team members from the winning team, the JEPCO alumni team. And after that, we decided we want to apply our strengths and our team capacities towards further ocean mapping projects and really apply that knowledge to important conservation and research work, especially in remote and kind of pristine locations, sensitive locations. And we started Map the Gaps, which is a 501c3 nonprofit registered in the state of Washington back in 2019, I believe. And since then, we've carried out a number of very successful mapping and exploration projects. And one of them was in Fiji, which was a collaboration with Sefano and the Pacific Blue Foundation, as well as, of course, SubMerge and Cooks and Adventures.
And you're also an ocean mapping lead for the submersible expedition company SubMerge. What does that entail?
Right. So for SubMerge, that company specializes in underwater exploration for human-occupied vehicles, submersibles, and we provide all of the expertise from mission planning, expedition planning, deck management, safety and rescue, as well. And part of that, of course, is mapping the seafloor ahead of an anticipated sub-expedition. So part of my role is to plan the survey and secure the necessary technology and teams for that, produce the final products, of course, after carrying out the survey with the team.
That's amazing. So, Sefano, I know that you are an ecologist and an environmentalist, but you also play a crucial role as the program director of the Pacific Blue Foundation's Beqa Lagoon initiative. Can you tell us about what you do in that role?
Hi, yeah, sure. Well, as an ecologist with an expertise in coral reef ecosystems, as well coming from a whole area of work that I've been doing in Eastern Australia, predominantly on the Great Barrier Reef, mostly in the basic sciences fields, working with different universities, government agencies and such, led me to look into the pathways of developing innovative approaches for social ecological systems solutions. And as such, I had found my place in Fiji. Joining the Pacific Blue Foundation in 2016, I've co-founded this program, the Beqa Lagoon Initiative, which predominantly looks at the seascape, which is over 440 square kilometers, which contains over 7 different islands, 3 of them inhabited, 2 by local indigenous communities, with approximately 1,500 people living there. And the work that we have been doing was predominantly looking into how we can develop these innovative solutions, where we take and utilize the local governance and celebrate the local traditions and culture to be able to find and apply solutions that would be making sense to the communities and importantly as well to the other stakeholders. So it's utilizing the background that I have in ecological sciences or natural sciences as a whole, and how we can look into the human dimensions and merging them together. And that was pretty much my mission since I've joined and co-founded the program.
Well, the community and the Beqa Lagoon must be very happy to have you. So, you're here to share your experience working together in the lagoon. Before we dive into the story of how this survey came together, I was wondering if you would tell our listeners about what you were looking to achieve.
Certainly. As there's a need to look into a variety of different aspects when we do look into a social ecological system, such as the Beqa and the seascape, or the Beqa Lagoon as a whole, we look into the natural elements. And in most cases, we can easily identify what's on land, what's in the forest, on the coastal zones, or even underwater when we conduct different surveys on the coral reef environment, which would be normally until up to the 20 to 30 meter mark. Beyond that depth, it is very hard to understand what's going on. And as we know, particularly because we have on our team as well oceanographers, more in the biological fields, we do know about, or at least we guess about different biological aspects that are to do with the deeper waters, but we have never really knew how the underwater world looks like. And as such, we were trying to think about ways that we can delve into that underwater mystery, let's say, and to get better idea of how the depths connect to the shallow waters and connect to the humans and to the ways we can develop management strategies.
Thank you for sharing that.
So, Tomer, what focused you on Fiji and this area in particular, wanting to do a survey there and create that data?
So Fiji, and specifically Beqa Lagoon as a destination, was brought to one of our clients through Cooks and Adventures, who was representing this client, and we're planning a submersible expedition to that location. And as part of that, we suggested to map prior to the trip, since no one's ever performed the sub-dive there, so literally zero information, and the nautical charts were out of date, and we had our doubts about the accuracy of some of the information there. So from a safety and planning perspective, it was our suggestion to perform that survey in that location.
That's fantastic. Sefano, I'm curious what you thought when Tomer first reached out to you about the survey. I was wondering, how did you think Fiji could benefit from this opportunity?
So as Tomer suggested, I was reached out by our mutual friend, which is also one of Tomer's partners on the work that they do. And I was initially super excited, having an old buddy reach out and trying to do some work together. For sure, let's see how and what we can do. And then with the discussion going on with Tomer, we understood that we can definitely have different aspects of the work and the expertises that we share to benefit both the program, which means the different stakeholders that are within the Beqa Lagoon seascape, which include, of course, the communities, the tourism stakeholders, business stakeholders, etc. But interestingly, the way we developed the program was looking into the wider context, in the national context, and what might be missing in, let's say, in Fiji in regards to the understanding of the underwater world. And as such, we had developed a partnership for this project, which was, besides Pacific Blue, Map the Gaps, and Cooks and Adventures, was together with the IUCN, the International Union of Conservation of Nature, as well with the University of the South Pacific, and importantly with the Fiji Navy, particularly with the hydrographic service, whereby we were able to look into how we can also support others with the work that's been done, with the expertise that Tomer and his team has, and to find a way to share and build capacity while we are doing the work with our partners here in Fiji.
Definitely sounds like there was a need for it, mapping that area that, as Sefano mentioned, is sort of that underwater mystery. And so when did Map the Gaps become part of these efforts?
Right. So Map the Gaps came in the planning phase as a partner with the responsibility of hosting the data and disseminating it further to other conservation and research partners, such as all the other parties in Fiji that we've worked with. The role that SubMerge had was to plan and carry out the survey and produce the final results, and of course, provide them to the client and to Map the Gaps. And from that moment, Map the Gaps actually handled the data going down the road and handing it out to the other partners. Yes, and actually, the online 3D map is hosted by Map the Gaps.
Is that a publicly available map? Are we able to go look at that data, or is it reserved for the communities and stakeholders in the project?
The data is publicly available. That's part of the Map the Gaps mandate, is that all their projects are always geared towards public use, and the data is made available.
That's great. We love hearing about data sources that help inform GIS folk about different areas that they may not know about or know the details of.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, what criteria informed the site that you selected for the survey?
Well, besides what Tomer has already shared in regards to what was requested, let's say from Cookson, in regards to the utilization of the submersible and the locations, when we were looking into suitable sites or sites that would be of interest where we can utilize some of this bathymetric data, we were looking to sites of importance. And this is coming from both an ecological perspective, biological, and also socioeconomic. And of course, with all what we're talking about in Fiji and conservation and natural resource management, socio-cultural. And the site that had been selected pretty much encompasses all of those elements. For example, with the ecological, in the two edges of the site, there are important reef passages. Now, these passages mean that they are enabling the movement of water in and out of the lagoon from these two important locations. So the hydrodynamics of that area is very important, utilizing those passages. From a biological perspective, in the previous years I've been working there, I've been fortunate enough as well to work with the different operators, including the tourism operators, which have shark dives. So these are shark provisioning sites. And from the time I've been there underwater, we've been noticing a whole area of different sharks, about 7 or 8 different species, including the big ones, which are the tiger sharks and the bull sharks, which constantly move around those areas. Now, perhaps there's definitely a direct link to the provisioning. However, we would see these sharks sometimes in the very deeper waters, way beyond the depths of human basic abilities utilizing standard scuba equipment. And we had the theory that there might be some patterns of movement that have something to do with the structure of the reef in the deeper waters. And that is also linking to the socioeconomic elements, which is a dive site where the tourism industry is working, many tourists and visitors come, and whereby the economy is also funneled through. And from an element of the social cultural, that is a place which is also very important to the local communities, whereby they had installed traditional no-take zones or marine protected areas, which were called dambu sites. So all these things together came whereby we looked into how we can take the data that might be achieved from the bathymetric data to support some level of decision-making towards a habitat conservation and animal conservation too in that site.
So, Sefano, what are some of the major natural and ecological challenges that the Beqa Lagoon is facing?
Yeah, as a small island and a relatively smaller lagoon, the main challenges are quite obvious and common throughout this part of the world, the Southwest Pacific. And this is climate change. Now, the basic impacts of climate change to small islands are to do with sea level rise, bigger storms, the disruption of the oceanographic or the atmospheric circulations that have been creating, let's say, extensive rainfall or precipitation disruptions. We are as well finding other challenges to do with the socioeconomic place of where local communities are trying as well to some extent even survive through these harsh natural conditions and still maintain a decent life. And we're talking about challenges of food security, alternative income avenues, which would be maybe different than agriculture and fisheries, which have been disrupted and impacted by external factors. And overall, the development of a hybrid governance structure and system, which both includes the modern way of political frameworks and how it can still maintain the cultural aspects of governance and rule and the management of the natural resources. And these are the forefront aspects that Pacific Blue Foundation has been working on. And this is how as well we find the utilization of modern elements of sciences to be supporting the local communities and merging the traditional knowledge and local knowledge that the people have for a future that can be viable for the local communities and the general community that are either visiting the area or have an interest in the area.
Well, thank you for explaining that. It sounds like the Pacific Blue Foundation is doing important work with the local communities.
Absolutely. So, would you walk us through the process of performing this bathymetric survey?
Sure. So in this, there are many different types and applications for bathymetric surveys, but in this case, we had a surface multi-beam that was mounted on a boat of opportunity, what we call, which is basically like a tender boat or like a center console fishing boat with an outboard. And this multi-beam echo sounder, it works like an acoustic scanner. So it works like a 3D scanner with sound waves, and it kind of scans the seafloor as the boat moves forward. So we mount that on the side of the boat along with 2 GPS antennas for positioning and heading. And basically then the boat is free to travel and kind of cover that area of interest, like paint it in, like color it in. So this survey, we covered, I think, about 10 square kilometers in very shallow waters, up to about 2 meters water depth on the coral heads there. In order to perform the survey, basically, I had 2 volunteers or assistants from the Fiji Navy, along with a boat operator, which was a local fisherman, so very knowledgeable. That was very helpful. And Sefano was with me as my local guide, translator, fixer of everything. And it was really everyone's cooperation and help that really made it possible. And basically for 5 days after we spent a full day in the boatyard mounting the sonar, we had to drill some holes and do some welding. And the owner of the boat was so kind to really allow those modifications to his boat and to enable the mounting of the hardware. And full day of work, we were able to put the boat back in the water and go out towards the island, towards the lagoon, and start the survey. The first couple of days, we had really great weather conditions, and the sea state was really kind of convenient to work with, and we were able to spend relatively long days. And then as that week kind of progressed, the weather was started to deteriorate. We had stronger winds, higher waves. That made our days a little shorter and kind of conditions on the boat a little bit more challenging for some of the team. Normally, the survey in those conditions happens during daylight because of the shallow waters and the challenges for navigation at night. We kind of avoid darkness. Basically, we had a full day to cover the area, times 5 or 6 days, and again minus the weather challenges that we had.
So what are some limitations, if there are any, of the multi-beam data collection technology? Are there depth limitations? You mentioned some maybe weather factors.
Right. A big role here because it really affects the motion of the boat. So as the boat rocks up and down the heave and kind of pitches and rolls with the waves, it really affects the data quality and sometimes creates aeration, like bubbles under the sonar head, and any kind of air bubbles in the water will really have an adverse effect on any acoustic information because of the scattering that those air bubbles create. For multi-beams, of course, they're limited. Their range is determined by the frequency of the sounds that they produce. So for shallow waters, we use relatively high frequencies, around 200, 300, 400 kilohertz. And those are, of course, the higher the frequency, the sound wave gets attenuated faster, so the range is shorter. And specifically, the Norbit multibeam that we were using had a range of about 300 meters. So we were able to map down to about 300 meters depth. Of course, when you have bigger boats, bigger multibeams, you can map deeper, even down to 11,000 meters, which is full ocean depth. But for that, you need a much bigger array.
That's really interesting to learn about. I don't know much about the data collection side. I'm mostly on the data processing side of these things.
Yeah, there's several more aspects about, the technicality of a multi-beam, how it works. Of course, it relies on GPS or GNSS positioning and heading, as well as ring laser gyro motion reference units that provide really high frequency measurements of pitch and roll and heave. And that is seamlessly kind of integrated into the data and is absolutely necessary for the processing.
It definitely sounds complex when you're on a moving boat and trying to get some sort of consistent data out of that. What
Yeah.
does this data end up looking like, and maybe what post-processing is needed to be done to clean up any of those sort of errors or artifacts that are collected?
Right. For processing multi-beam data, we commonly use proprietary software that is designed to handle multi-beam point clouds. It's similar to LiDAR in some aspects, but also there are several differences. So these point clouds are collected in water, and water is not a uniform media. So, for example, we have different densities, temperatures, salinities, and that has to be taken into account while processing. So, in order to correct for those differences in densities, during the survey, we also collect a sound speed profile from the surface, from the water surface, all the way down as deep as we can get with a sound speed profiler. So it's basically a vertical kind of cast, and that information is then used to correct those refraction artifacts that are caused by the difference in density and sound speed at different depths.
That's fascinating. It sounds like tons of data is being collected all at once. Definitely sounds like important equipment that you guys are using for all of that.
Yeah, and specifically to collect those sound speed profiles, our sensor that we had in-house was malfunctioning. So we had to request help from partners, and Sefano could definitely tell us how he helped us get a sound speed profiler.
Yeah, thankfully, after having a stronger coordination with our partners and the Fiji authorities, we got, I think it was the first day where we had that malfunctioning, and reached out both to the Fiji Navy, which were with us on board, as well to other partners at the Pacific Community, which is a regional science and research organization. And within, I think, 24 hours, we had people mobilized, or people were mobilizing and looking into the storage areas. And within the next day, we had a special delivery by a couple of naval officers that delivered the equipment from the Pacific Community all the way to us, and we were able to resume with our work. So we're definitely very lucky to be able to have that equipment in storage and unused by our partners. And as well, of course, I think it was a lot to do with the importance of the work where we were doing it, as well as there was very much a lack of bathymetric data, which Tomer as well suggests was all outdated. So there's a strong interest not only to support an important project, also to be helping to receive the data. And the mobilization was just outstanding by our partners and the Fijians here.
Yeah, wow, it must have been quite a relief when your partners mobilized and helped out so quickly. Sefano, would you talk a little bit about how you prepared for the survey from your end?
Yeah, sure. Well, with every and any research program or project that is done in Fiji or many other parts of the Pacific, there's a need to go through all the authority and the channels of acknowledgement and acceptance of who is doing what, why, and so forth. So for that reason, we had been in touch with the Fiji government, with the Ministry of Fisheries and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to be able to develop a research permit for this project. And importantly, we needed to have adequate local partners, As such, we had been in strong communication and collaboration with the International Union of Conservation of Nature, which their oceanic office is based here in Suva, whereby we also found some good inputs and support from our partners at the University of the South Pacific. And lastly, and importantly, the request from the Fiji government, particularly from the Permanent Secretary, from the Ministry of Fisheries and Foreign Affairs, to also include the Fiji Navy. And with our contacts that we have with the head of the Hydrographic Service, we were able to as well develop a capacity building program, which we had the two naval officers join the entire trip. The entire process from that element of coordination and paperwork was quite tremendous and something that was a challenge, but I believe that due to the acknowledgement of the importance, eventually it all went quite smoothly. Now, besides that, and I think most importantly, was the element of what eventually this data is going to be used for, and even more importantly, where's this data going to be collected from? And that is within the traditional fishing grounds of the local communities of Beqa. And Beqa is divided to two different districts, or you can suggest two different main tribes, and each of those would be a high chief. So there was a need as well to coordinate all this activity with the local communities. And prior to Tomer's arrival or during the process of the project development, we were, Pacific Blue Foundation and my colleagues were need to be in touch with the local community, with the tribal leaders, and with the high chief as well. And Tomer, if you recall, remember the first thing we had done on the first day was heading out to Beqa Island, was Tomer and myself, and as well with the Fiji Navy officers, where we needed as well to dress in the local traditional attire, which includes as well a sulu or a Fijian skirt, and go to the chiefly village and meet with the high chief and present what is it that we're doing, who are we, especially we're having Tomer and the naval officer having their first time there. There's a critical need to present an offering or sevu, which would pretty much entail our request to be here and then the request to go forward with the activity that we are aiming to do, which without the traditional blessing and support, one, we would not be able to do that. And secondly, we might be jeopardizing getting some bad waters. So it is super important, as we all still have here a strong belief in the cultural elements, the supernatural elements, or the cosmologies that the local communities and Pacific Islanders have here. And as such, it was important as well to have this presentation to enable the wider community that attended there to ask questions, criticize what we're doing there, and for them to understand what is it that we are aiming to do and what is it that we will be providing them along the way. So that important engagement is part of the core way that Pacific Blue Foundation operates, and to be able to bring on board top-level scientists and the collaborative approach of Tomer Map the Gaps and the Navy, the IUCN, the university, the Fiji government is enabling as well local communities to be up to par with what is being done and how they are an active voice and decision maker with all these elements and work.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying getting to hear about the Pacific Blue Foundation because it sounds like you're really considering all of the aspects of this survey, which is great because it considers the community and how the bathymetric data will be used. So that's been great to hear about. I think this is a great time to ask, what was the best part about this opportunity for both of you?
Well, it's funny that Sefano said, I hope Tomer remembers because this is a day I'll never forget, was that ceremony with the chief in Waisomo. I remember Sefano explaining to me all the different customs and instructions on the way out there as he was showing me how to tie the sulu. And it all sounded like a little overwhelming a little bit. But once we really went in there and I was witnessing this ceremonial exchange in the local language, which I do not understand, it all seemed very kind of magical to me just to witness that as part of my work. That was amazing, really. As an oceanographer, as a hydrographer, to come to a place, a community like that for generations has relied on their waters, on this lagoon for their well-being. And now we are there to make the first map of it. And to talk to them a little bit about the technology and what we're expecting. And the way the chief was so well informed and so deeply involved in everything, that it really showed how significant this was for them. And that's something I'll never forget. And it went on because after he approved of this project and gave his blessing for us to enter the lagoon and start the mapping, he said that his only request is that we come back when we're done and show them what we got. When we came back later, there was many more members of the elder council of that village, and that moment was even more powerful, more profound for me, because as soon as I showed them the 3D map that we made, and it was kind of interactive, you could like zoom in and out and pan and tilt, and they were really able to see the detail of the seafloor that is like at 200, 300 meters depth that they've never seen, but I suspect they always knew it was there. But when they saw it for the first time, you could see on their faces how pleased they were with it and how satisfying it was for them to see that representation in 3D shaded colored bathymetry that I think no one's ever seen that part of the world before.
That sounds truly amazing, like a wonderful experience to be able to go into that community and learn about them, and then be able to share the fruits of that data collection with them as well.
Yes, that was one of the most rewarding, gratifying moments in my career, was definitely that day. And I'm very grateful to have been able to be part of that project with Sefano and everyone else.
Yeah, that sounds pretty amazing. Sefano, I have a question for you. How does the Beqa Lagoon initiative benefit from collaborative and accessible opportunities like working with Map the Gaps?
I believe that it is critically important to find ways to combine different disciplines in the fields of sciences, in the field of humanities, which include the social cultural aspects, human rights, and particularly indigenous rights, which is something that is usually overlooked or disregarded. By having such a group or a team as well, which were from a variety of different institutions and fields, we were able to advocate and showcase how creating such groups towards the prospect of science that would support then decision making for conservation aspects was quite powerful. And as Tomer as well has been describing beautifully about the interaction with the community. And one important thing is to note that in many cases, unfortunately, research teams take data and take it back home, and rarely do communities get to see what was done. That is one of the PBF's mandates, that whatever's been done in the lagoon, within the waters or lands of the communities, is shared. They are a partner. They are part of the decision making. And that is critically important. Besides that angle, what we have done in this project, albeit being very small in regards to the time frame, into the geographical context of the work that we covered, it was, I believe, a first time for Fiji as well, perhaps even the region, where we combine the different stakeholders and partners. And importantly, through this work, we were also able to identify some other gaps that we were able to support the Fiji Navy's hydrographic service, for example. And even though this, as I said, was a very small scale project, it definitely provided the potential prospect for future development. Future development, which would be perhaps having more surveys and looking into surveying all of the lagoon, and looking into other ways to incorporate learning tools, new technologies that could be in support of the local stakeholders here in Fiji. Now, we do know that that is quite costly and does take time to develop and then implement. However, we are in belief that hopefully through our listeners and other interested parties that could reach out and then further inquire, we might be able to further develop a much bigger program for mapping that can both support the communities, both the authorities, and the local capacity building. And that is also one of the main things that I found much pleasure in seeing the potential future benefits of this project. And that, I think, is one of the goals that we have here in PBF, is innovative approaches for the development of or what might be needed in the realm of natural resource management, conservation, and development in the Southwest Pacific.
Yeah, that's amazing. I actually think that we're getting close to the end, so I might ask a question that directly relates to what you were just talking about, which is, Sefano, where can people connect with you? Where should they go if they want to learn more or get involved with the Pacific Blue Foundation or the Beqa Lagoon Initiative or donate to your efforts?
Yeah, thanks for that. We are always open to any interested parties just to connect with us, just to be able to ask what we're doing, and definitely if there are ways to partner. I would definitely say just go to our website, pacificbluefoundation.org. We have interesting and good presence on social media platforms, which is like Facebook, Instagram, some cool clips on YouTube, as well as a LinkedIn profile. All is at Pacific Blue Foundation. If anybody wants to reach out to me directly, I'll be more than happy. You can find my profile as well online on LinkedIn would be a good place. Sefano M Katz, as well as even reaching out through our website, our contact platform, that would eventually lead to me as well. So no worries at all.
Thank you for sharing where people can find your information. To our listeners, we'll be sure to share those in the description so you can find all of those there. Tomer, same to you. Where can people connect with you or learn more about Map the Gaps and SubMerge?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, I'm online. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, on my personal name, and also, of course, Map the Gaps has a website, mapthegaps.org. SubMerge has a website. It's sub-merge.com, and both organizations have their respective social media and YouTube channels. Map the Gaps also has an annual symposium, which is a conference. We've had, I think, over 600 attendees, virtual and in person. That's where we really bring together many professionals from the field of ocean mapping, but also stakeholders from our technology partners, software, and different industrial, commercial, government, and academia stakeholders as well. And there's always discussion about where are we going, what have we achieved, how can we do better. So yeah, I want to invite everyone who's passionate about exploring and protecting the ocean floor to connect.
Before we let you go, when is the 2024 symposium planned for?
So 2024, we don't have confirmed dates yet, but definitely stay tuned on our website, and you can always join our mailing list as well to be informed about the next symposium.
We want to thank Tomer and Sefano for joining us on the show and for sharing their story about the impact of accessible geospatial data. You can find our show notes, including any resources or data that we mentioned, in the description. If you enjoyed listening, subscribe to our podcast and turn on notifications so you don't miss any episodes.